Namaste, Victoria. Lovely to meet you, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Whereabouts are you at the moment? It must be early
I'm
your time.
in I'm in New York City, and for anybody that knows Manhattan, I'm 5 blocks above the top of Central Park.
Wow, must be beautiful.
Yeah, it's very nice. We're having a beautiful early spring.
Great, great. Well, look, I really appreciate you joining today. The Go Dharmic community is a growing community of people who want to make a difference and spread compassion in action. And looking at and researching about some of your work, which is an incredible body of academic as well as written material, and all the podcasts and the vast array of work that you're involved in. It's difficult to capture all of it, but it's incredible. And I think what you stand for is exactly what we want to promote and give voice to, and to promote in terms of the problems that we face as a society. So, really excited to hearing your story, hearing your message, and sharing that with everybody who can access this today. So really appreciate that, and thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Well, it's such a particular honor and pleasure to be with the Go Dharmic community because, in my humble way, I have been trying to go Dharmic my entire life. And there are beautiful spiritual teachings that need to come down into our bodies and minds and action so that we can take these principles that are so lofty and we can say, well, that's all good, but we're only human. No, we are fully human. And so we need to get this energy out into the world and use it for good, as you are doing.
Oh, that's a beautiful message to start with. So we should start on that note, because obviously the core of what we've been doing is that true spirituality is being compassionate and loving and caring for everyone on our earth, including the animals, including the earth itself, including all our fellow human family. What's your take on this? I read in your profile eclectic spirituality, or your understanding of that. What does that mean to you? What does spirituality mean to you, and what's your understanding of that?
Well, it means everything. And certainly because I am a person with flaws, it doesn't look every day, every minute of my life that it means everything. But in my heart of hearts, this is really all there is. And I have hearing some beautiful people that I have known in my life. The first one who comes to mind is back in the late 1960s, when the Beatles went to India and learned to meditate. I was friends with their equipment manager. His name was Mal Evans. And I talked to him when they had just gotten back from the first trip to India, and I was so excited about all the possibilities of we're all going to meditate and we're all going to get spiritual and it's all going to be so great. And he said in this wonderful Liverpool accent, well, I've been everywhere and I've done everything. And this spirituality, man, that's really all there is. And I just think it's so true. And then there's a wonderful quotation from Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, either God is everything or else he is nothing. And so with this kind of idea, I can certainly pursue what I want to do in this life for my own satisfaction, and I think some of that is dharmic too. Do the next indicated thing. I think we're led sometimes in our own particular path, but but when those desires are selfish, or when they're only for me and they're not for the whole, then they don't lead to happiness. They don't lead to any kind of peace. And then we look out into the world, we listen to the news, we see what's going on each day. And I don't know that we're going to be able to turn this around, the planetary crisis and all that. I am working hard every day, as you are, and probably everybody listening, to make sure that we do. And I also try to maintain a positive attitude that we will. But in some awful scenario that we don't, or that we don't do as well as we hope that we can do, we at least want to know that we did what we could. I mean, we're on this earth for a reason. And I think it's to spread love, find love, and just make things better.
That's really amazing. And yeah, I completely agree with you. And for people like you who work so hard in the world, and for trying to make a difference every day for the environment, for animal welfare, for uh, each other as human beings, and spreading that love, we can sometimes be dragged up into our mind, or and kind of sometimes lose hope, or you know, get down about the whole situation. But I think there's something which I actually, very relevant, I'd like to share with you from a book which was by Ram Dass, and it's and Mirabai Bush, who you may have come across in the US. And the book's called Compassion in Action.
Mhm.
And it was really about this very thing that you just mentioned. And compassion in action is also the kind of tagline for Go Dharmic that we follow and stick everywhere we can. And Ram Dass says in this book, if we are to help heal the world, we need to remember that it's a sacred place. Our actions need to be positive statements, reminders that even in the worst times, there is a world worth struggling for. We need to find ways to keep the vision alive, to acknowledge but not get caught in the dark side, to remember that even the worst aspects of suffering are only part of the whole picture. We need to enter lightly. Entering lightly means not ignoring suffering, but treating it gently. We don't want to ignore each other's paths or each other's pain, but our becoming depressed or angry about it doesn't relieve it, and may even increase it. The delicate balance is in allowing ourselves to feel the pain fully, to be sad or angry or hurt by it, but not be so weighed down by it that we are unable to act to relieve it with love. It is a matter of ends and means again. To create a caring, loving, peaceful world, we need to act with care and love and peace. Easy to say, you may think, remembering your heavy hearts, tears, and anger when you first saw the babies in Ethiopian refugees camps dying from malnutrition. But it is exactly at these times, in the presence of pain, injustice, and horror, that our equilibrium is most needed. How can we keep it? Meditation can help, singing can help, or walking can help. Talking and helping people we can respect help. Simply being quiet with ourselves can also help. It is the continuing work of life, or learning to trust that the universe is unfolding exactly as it should, no matter how it looks to us. We can learn to appreciate that each one of us has a role to play and a part in nurturing this interconnectedness, this whole, and healing it from where it is torn. Discovering what our individual contribution can be, then giving ourselves fully to it. Demanding as this sounds, it is what, in the spiritual sense, we are all here for. And compassionate action gives us yet one more opportunity to live it. I'm sorry for taking time to read that, but based on what you said, I really wanted to share that with you and everybody listening, and to get your thoughts on those ideas.
Oh, that's such a beautiful passage. I have not read that particular book, although my husband has. And, it's an interesting story as I think about him. When I met my husband 23 years ago, he was a regular guy, and he ate meat and he didn't think about spiritual things, and he was going on about his life being a perfectly, ethical person as is understood in the modern Western world. And that was it. But we influence other people. So within 2 weeks after we met, he stopped eating meat. He said that he'd never really thought about it, but that he had gone hunting once as a child with his cousins, and he had killed a bird. and that it was the most awful experience of his life, and he vowed he would never kill another living being, but he didn't make the connection with what he was eating. So it took a few years for him to make it to vegan, but he did. And and the spiritual thing was still, he was a very humanist, Western thinker. But again, people change and people open up. And I think in his case, just being vegan kind of sensitized his soul. And a year and a half ago, he said to me, I want to go back to school. And I thought, okay, I didn't know what he would study, political science or something like that. He'd been in law. And he said, I want to study theology. Well, I just about fainted because that was supposed to be my purview. He was supposed to be doing all this other stuff, but he's now in school to become an interfaith minister, starting
Oh,
something called
amazing.
the Compassion Consortium. And the Ram Dass book, this particular Ram Dass book was part of his required reading
Oh,
in the
really?
seminary for the spring. So yes, I mean, I love how Ram Dass explained it and how he really did away with that kind of spiritual whitewashing that it's so easy to do. We can say, well, gosh, this world is a mess, but it's not real anyway. So I'm just going to focus on my internal reality.
For my own
And
practice, right? Yeah.
yeah, and yet we're here. And it's almost like if you visit someone's home, you could say, well, this isn't my home. I'm just going to throw trash around and do whatever I want because I'm going to leave it, and who cares? Well, I think we ought to care. And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
certainly, I think this is one of the beautiful things. So many young people are really getting it, that it's all connected. And
Mm.
this compassionate living in this world supports our own spiritual growth and vice versa.
And it's probably the core of spiritual growth. Like, I love what you said about your husband. Veganism, or animal welfare, led him towards a spiritual understanding, because maybe in my view, or what I understand is non-violence to be a crucial aspect of spirituality. In the Indian traditions, they say ahimsa param dharma, which means, like the English word paramount, or non-violence is the highest of dharmas. And living in the world in a softer, gentler, kinder way to all living beings is actually what opens our hearts to connectedness, rather than even practicing independently ourselves or something.
Yes, and it's such a beautiful thing to look into the eyes of another being and just see what's there. And if indeed we are all connected, and if indeed there is one truth, and that is the light within us, then it's that one spirit, that one truth that all living beings share. I think if humans got that for 10 seconds, just imagine if for 10 seconds of time, every human being on earth, regular people who don't think they have much power to change anything, people with lots of influence and political clout and financial well being, all got it for 10 seconds that there is one life and we all share it. And for that reason, our well being, our welfare, our suffering matters equally. The whole world would change. It would only take 10 seconds. It would probably work with just 5.
What you said is resonates with something that Neem Karoli Baba, the guru of Ramdas, who he went to see, and became from Richard Alpert to Ramdas, created that transition. And many in India, many people, or in Hindu traditions, they chant with beads, mala beads, as you may know, like like a rosary. In many traditions of the world, it's used, and people, devotees would chant Ram, 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 or, the Beatles were obsessed with mantra chanting. They loved it. I think there's one where they said they did it for 48 hours non-stop, just chanting. And Neem Karoli would say that if you just said the name of Ram once with true awakened spirit, that would be enough. You'd be enlightened. And then he would laugh and say, "Go on singing your fake Ram now." But, so yeah, it really resonates with me, the fact that if we were just awake for a second, if we would just realize that connectedness for a moment, that would really bring us together in a real wonderful way that opens hearts. I want to ask you about the books. I mean, you've authored a number of books. What is it, 13 books or
Yes.
something on vegetarian? That's a
Yes.
huge amount of content. In this short conversation with 13 books, I don't want to do justice to say, give us the key takeaways. What can we learn in this short 1 hour from all the wisdom that you've accumulated and shared with communities over the years, that our community can really take away?
Life is meant to be magical and filled with meaning. So my books are kind of in two categories. I have books about spirituality, Shelter for the Spirit, Creating a Charmed Life. And then I have books about personal well-being and the vegan lifestyle, like Main Street Vegan, which has spawned everything that I've been doing for the past several years. I have Main Street Vegan Academy that trains vegan coaches, and the Main Street Vegan podcast is now in its 9th year. But it's all connected. And sometimes people who are a little bit outside of this way of seeing life that you and I, and probably almost all the listeners are aware of, they don't understand. So they'll say to me as an author, well, you have to have one genre, you have to have one platform. You can't do spirituality and veganism. And it's like, why not? Because I see a vegan lifestyle as nonviolence in action, which is spirituality in action. And so it's really all the same. So I think the idea of, as Ram Dass said, we learn about the suffering, we know about the suffering. And that's certainly something that I have learned in animal rights. I mean, I've been to factory farms. I spent a day in a slaughterhouse, and I'm glad I did it when I did it, because now I'm not sure I would have the stamina to be able to endure that. And yet, even though, yes, that is all true, and my life is dedicated to being one part of this huge movement to mitigate that suffering. And on the other hand, if I don't have some fun today, if I don't appreciate the fact that it's warmer than it has been lately, if I don't appreciate the fact that because of COVID and not being able to get out to get my dog a haircut, he just looks like the funniest, scruffiest, almost little homeless dog. If I can't just get, some joy out of that today, then I won't have the energy to go forward and do some of this harder work.
That's amazing, and I'm so glad you said that, because I think activism can become very negative very easily, or create political tension, or create difference between people who are a certain way or not, or even the vegan movement has often been accused of becoming quite aggressive at times. And I believe that what we've tried to do, based on the principles of Dharma, is to ensure positive social action and to ensure everything is love-based. So if there was one word I would choose to describe the work that you do, it's love. It's love for animals. It's love for as the core of spiritual tradition. I don't know how you feel about that. What does love mean to you?
Oh, it means everything, because it means God. And, a lot of people who don't want to say vegan for whatever, they'll say they eat a plant-based diet. Well, that's okay, but I want to eat a love-based diet. I want to live a love-based life, and the rest is going to take care of itself. I mean, there's something in the Bible, perfect love casts out fear. And fear is the big enemy. It's the enemy of can I do this? You know, that we have this, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome, where we all think, oh my gosh, you know, I'm just me. How could I possibly contribute? You know, live in love. And we all know how to do that. My dog knows how to do that. In fact, he's an expert. And if we're living in love, we don't have to have some kind of giant degree from some famous university. We don't have to be called upon by some massive corporation to go out and do something huge. We do today what we can do, and then it ripples. I'm a big fan of the ripple effect. So maybe today I'm not going to change the whole world, but I'll do what's before me to do. One of the most poignant and practical and useful pieces of advice I was ever given was this phrase, do the next indicated thing. And when I do that, my little to-do list, and it doesn't always look, you know, lofty and wonderful, but I do that, and then that ripples out, and the next thing, and the next thing, and you never know who you're going to reach. A long time ago, I wrote an article in a pretty small animal rights magazine that not very many people read, but somebody read it, and I got a call from a young man who said, I'm a student at Grinnell College, and I read your article, and I've become vegan. Now, this was back in the late 1980s when there weren't a lot of vegans. And it was like, okay, that's cool. And I didn't really know what I was supposed to do beyond that. You know, this total stranger called me and told me this, and it was nice. Well, it turned out that that young man was Bruce Friedrich, who went on to be with PETA for 20 years. Esquire magazine named him one of the most influential young men under 35 when he was under 35. And now he heads up the Good Food Institute, which is doing remarkable things with plant-based and lab-grown meat to really turn around animal agriculture, which could just be such a boon. I mean, when you think about animal suffering, planetary destruction, and human suffering, I mean, just that one thing alone, if we could just not do animal meat and do plant meat or some other kind of thing.
Yeah,
Well, this is Bruce Friedrich who read my article, which I don't know if 500 people read it or 50. I mean, it was it wasn't any big deal, but it turned out to be a big deal. So just do your thing, and
yeah.
you just don't know where it's going to go.
It's such an amazing idea and incredible example of that ripple effect, or what can happen. And I agree with you. And I really believe that as well. That sometimes we've been running Go Dharmic for 9.5 years. This is the 10th year, and when we started, we were speaking out into the ether. You don't know who you're reaching. You're just saying something that you feel passionately about, or giving your heart into making a difference for people who are suffering or vulnerable, whether they're homeless people on the streets or whether it's helping to uplift education facilities for vulnerable kids. We just did it because it felt like the right thing to do. And recently somebody gave me got in touch with us and said, hey, I'm in this position, I really want to help broadcast your platform. I met you when I was a young kid, and it really had an influence on me when I got a leaflet. And we don't remember that instance or that person at that time, but could have been just a 15-year-old kid, and now at 25 it's somebody who will slightly change the course of their direction based on the heart that you've shared with them at that moment or that time. So I'm totally with you that every action may not feel important to us right now, but it can transform the world through a way that we can't see or
Right.
plan for.
Oh, that
And you
well,
mentioned he was under 35 for what was the thing?
oh, Esquire magazine had most influential men under 35, and he's not under 35 now, but but he did,
Well,
and he's, I mean,
Victoria, you're under 35, I'm sure of it.
in my spirit.
You're lying about your age, obviously. You're under
Yeah.
35. I look older than you, and I'm 40 this year. What's your secret?
Um, I I'm not sure. I'm about to turn 71, and I know that this is not what I expected at 71. And I understand nobody is as old now as people used to be. I think just, I don't know if it's better nutrition or I don't know what it is. I just know that when I was a little girl, 70 was very different from what it is now. But I do think that there is a lot about going forward in life productively and well. One thing is living in the day. And I've been inculcated with the idea of living in day-tight compartments was the phrase that the psychiatrist Maxwell Maltz used. This is what I have. And if I find myself wandering too much into the past and wishing I could change things back there, it just, it's not helpful. And if I find myself projecting too far into the future, oh my gosh, oh, what if, that doesn't work very well either. So certainly plan and prepare, but live in this day. I think that that's my first youth promotion tip. Uh,
It's like
and
Ramdas said, "Be here now," right? That was his famous.
exactly. Perfectly, of course. And then I think there's also something to be said for eating food from the plant kingdom. And I also I've been, well, vegetarian since 1969, a vegan since 1983. And in more recent years, I've really become very Ayurvedic. I mean, vegan Ayurvedic. So, they might tell me to use ghee, and I will say, I'm not going to do that. I'll do everything else you tell me. But I think there's a lot to that as well, just living in cooperation with nature. And I kind of almost laugh at that because I'm in New York City, and there's a joke that you're a real New Yorker if you think Central Park is nature. So it's not, when I say live in harmony with nature, it doesn't have to mean go back to the land, but just the idea, just as the seasons shift, and to just kind of be aware that just because it happens to be the 21st century, nature is what nature is. And the more we can cooperate, which is very much what Ayurveda is about, I think the better we go forward. And then finally, the last thing I'll say on that is having something that you are absolutely enthusiastic about, that and something that you believe in, that's bigger than you. And you talked about my 13 books. I'm actually working now on number 14, and my working title is Becoming Iris, because when I was very young, I was 20, I worked in the library of the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in America. And whenever we were overworked or people had been messy with the books and we just needed more help, we would call in this woman named Iris. She was a theosophist who lived locally. She didn't live at the headquarters like the regular employees, but she would come in to help. And she was about 80 years old and had this wonderful white hair and this just light. I mean, she would just light up the room. And I was thinking back then, wait a minute, I'm 20. I'm supposed to have this fresh glow of youth. And here in comes this octogenarian who's just turning all the heads. What, what is happening here? And what I see is that she had really lived a life, both spiritual in terms of internal, meditating twice a day, vegetarian, all that, but also doing the work in the world, service. I mean, she was a true karma yogi. We could call her at 8 in the morning and she'd show up at 8:30. And so this book that I want to write, it's not just about her, but it's about all of these teachers that I have had in my life, particularly older women. And I know that you were involved a couple of days ago with International Women's Day. And sometimes I don't think very much about women and equality and all that kind of thing, because I live in a country where women have had, I think, a better chance than in a lot of places. And also because I was just raised, I was told, well, you do whatever you want to do. And so I did. But also, I'm beginning to see, and particularly as I get older, that older women are very much disenfranchised from society, and there's probably very few groups, certainly in American culture, that are more kind of outside of the loop than the old lady. And so I want to celebrate these great spiritual gifts that I have received from women who were older than me back before I was their age.
That's incredible. I mean, I agree with you as well that, I mean, I've grown up in England, and probably has a similar culture to America in terms of uh, importance placed by society on the working age population and young children, especially, have taken a lot more. I mean, when we grew up, we just played and did whatever we want in the garden or outside, whereas now uh, people of my age are much more focused on their children and caring about how they're playing, what we do. We were always just thrown in the garden and playing. And I feel that now, parents are all over what their kids are doing. They understand exactly how they're working, what a schedule, over scheduling classes and doing this and really doing that. And I think the focus has been lost on my grandparents' generation. And recently, I lost my grandmother recently during this last 6 months period, and that generation has been highly at risk due to COVID, and was told to shield and stay alone, and really in their final stages of life, especially, kept away from social interaction and not being able to meet their loved ones and friends and even other elder people of their own age that they used to get together. My grandmother used to get on buses to go for an hour to get a pizza in London and go with her friend for a coffee 2 hours away, just to get on a bus and go for a short adventure and enjoy herself and live her life exactly how she wanted to. And I feel that maybe some of the traditional cultures of the world, whether it's like villages in Italy or India or maybe some African cultures, they have, or older cultures in the West, but maybe lesser so in today's age, they have that strong family bond where the elder, especially the elder woman of the family, the grandmother or the great grandmother, they are the leader, they are the maternal, the head of the family, and respected and loved and cherished, and all wisdom comes from. And I felt that that was part of our family as well. But I feel somehow across the UK, at least, we're losing some of that respect and love for the older generation and what they carry. And sometimes they're placed into homes, or they live alone by themselves and just see loved ones once a week, or on Mother's Day they receive a card, or there's a missing gap to connecting with the wisdom generation that carries so much life experience and so much love. How
Well,
do you
it's
feel about that?
that it's tremendously inefficient. And I really dislike inefficiency when we're looking at the environmental situation, and we hear about food waste, and we hear about, the way that energy with just the technology we have right now could be used so much more efficiently, but we don't do it. It's so frustrating. And so when you talk about this wisdom, this wisdom that's passed down through generations, or it's meant to be passed down through generations, and when that stops, I mean, the loss is tremendous. I think we also have to be making up for what might be lost to technology. I mean, I love reading the letters of literary or spiritual people from the past. Well, I hope somebody is saving emails because I mean, there's just so much that's falling through the cracks. And whenever we think about a wise woman, a wise person, off in a flat somewhere without a way to pass that along. It's so sad. So since you mentioned London, my favorite city on the planet, I moved there on my 18th birthday and would have stayed, but the immigration thing didn't work out after my student visa expired. But that was where I started yoga. So I had read when I was in Kansas City, when I was 17, I read all 3 yoga books that were in the public library. There were only 3 at the time,
What
but
were
I
they?
read them over and over again. And then when I went to London, I actually found someone teaching yoga, and her name was Stella Churfus, and she taught in Covent Garden. And so it changed my life. It opened up everything. I was dealing at that time with a binge eating disorder, and I hated exercise. And the idea that I could do some sort of physical movement and bring my soul along was just extraordinary.
What were
So,
the books?
oh, those 3 books, Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation by Jess Stern, and 2 books by Indra Devi,
Okay.
Forever Young, Forever Healthy, and Yoga for Americans. So that was what I had to start with. But Stella, I kind of lost. I came back to the States. I didn't go back to the UK for about 12 years at that point. I looked for her. I couldn't find her. Every time I went back, I'd look. I couldn't find her. Well, she was living on the continent, and I finally found her about 5 years ago. So she is now 94 years of age. She lives in a 4th floor walk up in Covent Garden, and she still teaches 1 yoga class a week. It's been on hold for the pandemic. But
Wow.
we talk because I need that lineage. I need her wisdom, even though, most people meet me and it's like, oh my God, she's really old. She's 70. Well, there's somebody older than me who's got wisdom that I don't have. And so, yeah, we talk about once a month. And we need this. So if you don't have a grandmother or somebody in your own family, find somebody somewhere. They are waiting to talk to you. They want to talk to you. And if you do have people in your own family, just go there. And if you think, well, yeah, I have a grandmother, but she doesn't seem very spiritual or anything. Oh, it doesn't have to be spiritual like
Yeah,
religious. Life experience has given her, or your grandfather or an elder man,
that's
something
incredible.
that is very spiritual, whether they call it that or not.
No, that's incredible. And one of the things our volunteers have been doing, I'd like to share with you, is um, partnering up with an elderly and isolated person who,
Ah,
like a companion. So, we've been delivering food packs and meals to people throughout the pandemic. And and whenever we come across somebody who is alone and isolated and benefiting from meals or not, they're alone. We just have somebody that they can become friends and check in and see. Just ask, how are you? Are you okay? How are you getting on? And talk to them and spend some time. And it could be about absolutely nothing. It could be about something that came on television or something that they've been up to or something that's interesting them. And we started our phone line for Godamic where anybody could call in when they were struggling for food, and we would try to get them food meals delivered throughout the pandemic. And the phone line was inundated with calls, not just for food packs, but for people who were lonely and just wanted to talk. So when
mm,
they would call up in the morning, and then they might just be asking about their food pack, but perhaps stay on the phone for 30 minutes and talk to the volunteer on the other side, just keeping them on because they wanted that company and wanted someone to engage with. So I think there's a serious issue around loneliness, and it's our loss as young people, as younger people. We've got a real wisdom tradition to take advantage of that we need to do. But I want to ask you one question before we move back to discussing vegetarianism, veganism, plant-based diets, whatever you love-based diets, as you mentioned. I love letters too. I find them fascinating, and some pages that I follow online share letters of some great spiritual teachers of the past, or people like Swami Vivekananda. I love to read his collected works and letters, and Mahatma Gandhi's collected works and letters are incredible as well. Who are the people that you know, when you mention letters that you like to read or you loved, is there any particular teachers or traditions or, you know, people that you've been inspired by and followed their letters or just been inspired by?
Yes, well, you certainly named a couple. I'm fascinated by Swami Vivekananda because he was so young when he came to the West, and he was the first. He was such a trailblazer. And I'm also fascinated by the women who supported him, and recently read a fascinating book about American women, a couple of British women too, who opened their homes to him. And I can just imagine what it was like at that time, because women, I think, not in any way to diminish men, but I think women have always had just a little bit more elasticity in terms of openness to ideas that are foreign or different or other. And so I can just imagine these women saying, there's this Swami from India, and he says, and the husbands either rolling their eyes or saying, you know, not in my home, or whatever they might have said. And the women were like, I'm going to go ahead with this anyway. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that. I also recently read a biography, speaking of Indra Devi. It's called The Goddess Pose. And you know the movie Forrest Gump, how Forrest Gump got to every important global event that was happening during his lifetime. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Well, that was how Indra Devi was in her actual life. She was born in Russia, but she traveled everywhere. And so for every revolution, for every great discovery, it just happened that she was there. And this fascinates me because this is what I believe that I have done and am doing with my life. And I think about my own stories, and it's like, oh, don't bore people with your stories. But oh my goodness, they're fascinating juxtapositions of how one individual's life can be it in keeping, can be right there with another life that had influence on the world. So I think that to read about other people's adventures, you used the word adventure when you were talking about your grandmother, and then our own adventures, and what do these mean? um, you know, I talked about knowing that person who worked for the Beatles, and at one night he introduced me to Paul McCartney. We were in a little club in London called Bag of Nails, which closed for many years and is reopened. I understand it. Don't know if it survived the pandemic, but anyway. Um, and my friend Malcolm said, there's someone I want you to meet, and he takes me through this dark, smoky at that time club, and there's Paul McCartney, and I'm just speechless. And Paul says, "Hello, Vicky," and I thought, I can die now. I mean, I have been recognized, you know, by my favorite Beatle. So who needs to live longer than 17 years? And so, you know, we sat and talked, and the very next month at the very same club, Paul McCartney met Linda Eastman, who would be his wife for many years. They would find vegetarianism together and all of that. But at the time that happened, he wasn't vegetarian. I wasn't vegetarian, but it was almost a precursor, you know, of things to come. And then just other things through my life, these amazing little bits of magic. Like, how did this happen? I mean, I haven't always lived in New York or London. I mean, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, which is right in the middle of the United States. Doesn't seem to be a place where a whole lot of miracles transpire, but miracles happen there every day because miracles
Right.
happen everywhere every day. And so I think it's important, yes, you know, read the writings, the letters, the what's been written about incredible teachers of the past. but also look at your own story as it unfolds and unwinds. And what happened today? What happened yesterday? What little opening of heaven happened for you? This is why journaling is so good, because you
Mm,
think, oh, well, that was no big deal. No, you only think it's no big deal because it happened to you. If it happened to somebody else and they told you about it, you would be like, are you serious? Yeah, let's be serious.
that's incredible. One of the things we've done recently is we've launched an app where people in our community can share not only the voluntary work that we're trying to do together and coordinate from a logistical standpoint of helping one another in their karma yoga, um, as you described it, but also we have a group on there for all of those volunteers and members who are involved in this work called Heart Space. And
Oh,
in that heart space, they can come and connect and share things that are interesting, or it could be, somebody's birthday, or it could be somebody wants to give something away and they're trying to find a way to reach other people, or just share something that's like experiences. So, somebody, um, last month we had a volunteer who was in a supermarket and she had our Go Dharmic van parked outside. And as she was purchasing some produce to give to school families the next day, somebody had walked out, gone to their car and saw the van in the car park of the supermarket, then went back into the store, saw the security guard and said, that van there, who's shopping for that van and who does it belong to? And then the security guard pointed out that there's a lady over there who's her name's Arati. It's her birthday today, actually, and she was collecting the food. And the lady came over and said, "Look, I just went outside. I asked the security guard, who's this, and I just want to give you some money to say, towards the shopping that you're doing for these vulnerable school families." And for me, that spiritual experience, that is the heart connection and the heart space that we want to promote and to share, and to there's so many people ready to conflict and to create more negative energy in the world, or to create more division amongst people. We want to stand for and share voices like yours, where people can become truly inspired, and their hearts actually become warmed, rather than listening to all the noise out there. As you practice yoga, that I love the phrase yogas chitta vritti nirodha, which means the calming of the mind and the stilling of the mind is where yoga lies, not in creating more fluctuations and more, I guess, negative energy is what they were trying to talk about, rather than heart energy. How do you, like, in the same mood, we feel as a community, and I really do feel strongly about this, that animal agriculture hasn't been discussed enough in the context of the environment. And I guess it's because of the difficult question that most of the people making those big decisions, or those people in those decision-making capacities in politics and in leadership or in organizations across the world, whether it be for-profit or non-profit, are not aligned with veganism or practicing vegetarianism or plant-based diets. They find that a personal challenge for themselves to overcome, and henceforth in the public discourse, something that's probably 50% if we look at the transportation of animal agriculture and the production, the wasteful production of meat for food, contributing such a huge amount to environmental damage in the world. Why do you think that that's not discussed enough? Why is it COP26 is happening in Glasgow this year, and this is why we came here to. I'm so glad to be connected with you, and there's so much for us to talk about, and love to kind of stay in touch for many years to come. But specifically, this was organized so that we could give voice to the fact that COP26 is happening in Glasgow this year in December, the biggest climate meeting since Paris Agreement, which now I'm glad that the US is now back in line with. We have this coming up, and animal agriculture is still a very small part of the conversation. Veganism is not really promoted. There may be, I don't know, I don't think, I've never been to a COP before, but we're going to be distributing vegan meals to everybody at the event for all to eat. Why is it still not out there in the public discourse?
Well, that is the big question. And I think there are lots of answers. As you talk about COP26, I just want to let people know about a beautiful film that I was involved with, where the filmmaker went to COP22 in Morocco, yes, Morocco, in 2016, as well as great travels across the US and throughout India. And the film is called A Prayer for Compassion. And it's about the juxtaposition of spirituality and food choices. So he speaks with representatives of just about all the religions. I mean, I suppose if one says all, there are thousands, but all the major religions and some that aren't quite so major. So that's something that people can watch on Vimeo or Amazon, A Prayer for Compassion. Wanted to get that out there. So to answer your question, certainly a lot of it is economic, because you can't point to a country on earth that doesn't have agriculture as a predominant part of its economy. And in the US, certainly, animal agriculture has been supported with government subsidies, where growing plants just seems to be sort of an after effect. And it's almost like the way we look at the plate. You know, we think of the entree, which for non-vegetarians is almost always meat. And even for vegetarians, we think of it as something really solid. That's where we're going to put the beans or the tofu and the quinoa. And, you know, it's all fine. I mean, certainly we need food that isn't just fruits and vegetables and watery, but this idea that meat is real food and the other food is just kind of an accessory is problematic. But perhaps the key problem is that we look at food choice as just a personal choice. That's why I try hard to avoid the word diet whenever I am talking. I mean, and I've probably said it in this call, but I try not to say vegetarian diet, vegan diet, and think of it, you know, more as the norm. And I know one thing I noticed when in India, a lot of restaurants that did serve meat would say, you know, vegetarian and meat. You know, it was like the meat was something extra. But I think in the West, you know, the meat is what's considered normal. So I think we need to shift to that. And I think we need to look at eating a plant-based diet or a predominantly plant-based diet, not just as a personal choice because I want to have clear arteries, or, you know, I'm a yuppie and that's what my friends do. Because that's how a lot of people look at it, as no, this is a moral imperative. We have a planet to save. Is it the only thing we need to do? No. But is it an extremely, again, efficient thing to do? Well, absolutely. I mean, you know that methane would clear the atmosphere in 10 years, and even if we fixed carbon today, it would take 100 years. I mean, it's just so sensible to eat
Right.
plants. And so the way I think as individuals we can go about this, and obviously we need to be doing all the governmental and the corporate and that, but I don't have a way to influence a government or a corporation, but I can influence people,
One
regular
person at a time.
individuals. Exactly. And this is the one thing I know a lot of people, you know, capitalism is kind of a loaded term. You know, we don't want to talk about that. But the fact is, certainly one positive of a capitalist system is that the marketplace moves what is going to be provided. And if everybody said, we do not want meat, we do not want eggs, we do not want dairy, we want fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, that's what these people would be providing. They want to make money. They don't
Right.
want to kill animals. I mean, that's just what they do to make money. So to get it down to an individual level, I think we just need to start seeing this as the norm. I mean, I treat everybody that I run into as a vegan. And if they're not, it's just like, well, you are. You're pre-vegan. It's like, oh, maybe today,
Right.
you had a chicken sandwich, but you're really vegan. And I
So
think
one of
we
the
need to
things,
hold that view.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. Well, one of the things that we've recently launched as part of this whole initiative to go green and to promote that action loudly and proudly through Go Dharmic and through whoever we can reach is a campaign called Go Plant Based, where people can take a pledge to go vegan, or at least to go vegetarian and to take that first step. Um, we've launched that a month ago, and so far 50 people have taken a personal pledge to go
Ooh.
plant-based, and that's a really wonderful thing. And I really, many people were concerned, or they have, fears about that big shift of personal lifestyle. What would you say to those new people who have just recently made that pledge and that decision, and to people considering it? And what resources could that you are currently putting out there in terms of your podcast and your what can people learn from you in that regard? They're just closet vegans.
Yes.
They're just
Well,
about to, yeah.
one thing is to know that this is no longer new and it's no longer odd. Even if you happen to be in a family or a workplace or a community where it seems new and odd, maybe you're the only person that you know that's looking at this, but you're not. And this is one of the great gifts of the internet. You can see that this is absolutely booming around the world. There's no longer any question that it's completely health promoting as long as you supplement vitamin B12, which is not reliably found in plants. And you can do this any way you want. You can just make it completely fun. If you're somebody who is used to eating lots of pizzas and ice cream and things like that, well, there's all that stuff is available vegan. You can do that. Or if you actually want to help out your arteries and be healthier, then you'll go for more of the simple plant foods. But there's room for both. And I think we have to just open up to where you are. Why do you want to do this? What do you eat now? And you can just shift a little bit. So if you always have burritos on Monday night, well, you can keep doing that, but you just make it a bean burrito. And if you want some cheese in there, there's all sorts of wonderful vegan cheese. And you just figure it out. And it's really easy nowadays. Now I am going to sound like an old lady because I'm going to say, when I started this, it was really there. You couldn't just walk into a supermarket and get non-dairy milk. I mean, they've had it in the UK for a long time. We didn't have it reliably in the States until I would say maybe 15 years ago. I mean,
Right,
this is
right.
so it's pretty easy. So in terms of resources, well, obviously, I certainly invite you to my website, mainstreetvegan.net, where you can read about the podcast and my books and events coming up. An event I would love to just share with your listeners, because I think they would be in tune with it, is something happening March 20th, a week from Saturday, and it's called Yoga Goes Vegan. And you can read more about that at tinyurl.com/yoga goes vegan, because yoga, it invented ahimsa. I mean, so it's really time for, you know, that evolution as we all evolve and learn from one another. So another resource that I always love recommending, if you're concerned about the nutrition part, or if you're just interested, you just want to be not just okay healthy, you want to really be healthy, and that is nutritionfacts.org. That is from Dr. Michael Greger, and he has these wonderful, really short videos about every topic. So if somebody comes up to you and says, well, what about calcium? What about iron? What about whatever? You just go to nutritionfacts.org, and there's a video on it, and it all is from the scientific literature. It's not just somebody thought something up. It's solid information. And in terms of animal rights, I have to say I'm a big fan of PETA. I know PETA can be kind of controversial, but they have done so much for animals since their founding in 1980, and their information is solid, and they have specific parts of PETA, which is cool. It's like when something gets big enough that it can kind of split and be specific, you really know something is happening. So there's PETA Kids, and there's PETA
Right.
Prime, which is people over 50. And so you can get some, you know, some wonderful insights there. And then finally, I'll just recommend the documentary films. I talked about A Prayer for Compassion if you're into spirituality, but for the environment, Cowspiracy, and the Cowspiracy people have a new film coming out about fish that's going to premiere later in the month. Vegucated, Speciesism, the movie. There are just so many wonderful films on this topic. Game changers, if you're an athlete or if you're intrigued by athletes. You know, you just give yourself a weekend and binge on those movies, and you will go out into that week knowing that you are doing the right thing for the planet, for the animals, for other people. We haven't talked about world hunger, but a plant-based diet also has an impact on that. And then for your own health and longevity, because you need to live a long time and keep saving this planet.
That's an incredible message, and I hope many people will go ahead and take a pledge to become plant-based in their lifestyle and love-based in their outlook on life, and really make it their own, not something that they're just taking on for education or just for to be up here, but actually to live from the heart and soften the way that they approach the world. I really appreciate speaking to you today, and all of those wonderful resources you shared. We'll make sure that we share the event that's coming up with our community, and hopefully many can attend. And just as a last point, I think, you know, the world hunger part that that you mentioned, we've done over 4 million meals for vulnerable people distributed, and those meals, it took me a long time to realize what connection those meals have to the education around the environment and veganism and so on. It was literally just helping people who are poor, or, you know, on the sleeping rough on the streets of London or in India or different places. Now we really want to educate through the meals about, hey, this meal doesn't have to cost much. It can be very nutritious for you, like khichdi. I don't know if you're aware of, like, dishes of food which you know, can be cooked for 20 cents a person. If there's 4 or 5 people, bought lentils and brown rice and vegetables mixed together, doesn't have to be expensive. And I think educating people that they don't need to go to fast food joints to purchase their food, and can cook at home in a very nutritious and economic way to reduce harm on their own pockets as well as the environment, can be a really big call to action and reason for them to make that switch. So I hope many people do take the plant-based pledge based on, after listening to you speak, and I hope we can be in touch for a long time in the future, because I really love speaking with you, and I think your message needs to go everywhere it can.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
It's
much.
been a pleasure for me as well.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.